Welcome to the course on Mocap cleanups. We've now reached the most important video in this course. In this video, I'll be telling you about the core tools that I'm using every time I need to do a Mocap cleanup. First, let's review the basics of the pipeline. To begin with, we prepare a scene with a character. Then, we load animations on this previously created character. Do retarget if needed. Retargeting should be done before the mocap cleanup. Then, we prepare the animation fragment that we need. If necessary, we remove any limbs twists and we add missing tracks. And after all the steps, we can move on to the most important part, for which we'll need the following tools. Fulcrum motion cleaning, mostly applied to the character's feet. Scene linking for pro subscriptions. Interval edit mode. And unbaking. Don't forget to like this video. Your support is very important to us. Now, let's get started. Let's start with the fulcrum motion cleaning. Feed sliding like this is a very common problem in mocaps. To demonstrate this, I created a few simple scenes. Here you can see how the character is constantly shifting, which also leads to his feet shifting as well. All you need to do is select the frames and press this button to align the feet. And that's just it. Fulcrum motion cleaning is a pretty advanced tool. It automatically determines the appropriate position based on the average foot positions in the animation. And of course, it adjusts to the character's movements such as jumps, steps, and so on. And knowing the principles of this tool will allow you to account for all the nuances. For example, let's take a look at this tiny shift that still remains even after the tool is applied. Let's look at why it's there and how to remove it if needed. Let's return to the original scene. Turn on this button to visualize the fulcrum points. Fulcrum points are highlighted in green. This green line also appears above the timeline, the color of which indicates how many fulcrum points there are in a given interval. Dark green means there are lots of fulcrum points in this frame. Orange color means there are no fulcrum points in all these frames. Whether the point is considered fulcrum is determined by these parameters. The first one is how far the point is located from the ground. The second one determines how far the point can move laterally. And here we see that in the orange interval, the character has moved so much that the distance between the feet and the ground has exceeded this number. And that's why during cleanup, this interval was considered as a micro step. You can try manually adjusting these settings, and by the way, we have a separate video about it. However, as a rule, you don't really need to do this. Please note that after cleanup, this gap without fulcrum points has disappeared. This happened because Fulcrum Motion Cleaning tool automatically corrects all gaps where the feet are below ground level. And now, if I want the character's legs to straighten up, I can simply use the tool again. That's it. Here's another example where I've collected the most frequent use cases. In the first segment, one foot moves up and down while the other rotates in place. Next comes a jump. Then, the character shifts one foot to the side and drops the other on the heel and stands on the toes. Let's apply our tool and see what happens. As we can see, the shift of the first foot is completely gone. But the tool did not affect the rotation of the second foot, since in real-life animations, this rotation often needs to be preserved. The jump segment is fully accounted for and no corrections were applied. In the second segment, the first foot is positioned straight, but for the second foot, the tool preserved the animation and at the same time lifted the leg so that the heel did not move back. The segment where the toes are lifted hasn't changed either. For larger scenes, I recommend applying this tool gradually, in smaller segments, and immediately checking the results. This way, you can track and immediately correct it if the tool did not perform the way you would like it to. And now is a good time to tell you about the tool for linking scenes. Scene linking tool is only available in the Pro version of Cascadeur. It is an optional tool, but it's a very nice addition to everything you do. This tool allows you to see objects from other scenes in the one you're currently in. For example, I'll open my scene for demonstrating food cleaning tool in the adjacent tab. Now I go to the main scene, right-click on the name and select Link Scene. You can adjust the color of the link scene and also its offset relative to the current scene. Now I can easily see how my scene has changed compared to the original one. This helps me ensure that important elements are not missing from the animation. This can also be used to add surrounding objects without overwhelming the scene you're currently working in. This is very convenient. Now, on to the next one. The Interval Edit mode allows you to edit an object across all selected frames at once. For example, let's take this simple scene with a cube. To illustrate this, I'll enable the Ghost mode. In this mode, I'll see the cube's silhouettes in adjacent frames. I'll add more frames to be displayed, and I also want to see only the keyframes. Now I can clearly see the cube's position throughout the entire range of motion. Now let's take a look at the operating modes. And the first mode is Step. I select the animation frames and enable the Interval Edit mode. Now you can see a red frame appearing in the viewport. In this mode, all changes are applied equally to all selected frames. This is very convenient in cases when you need to move the entire animation. Following this logic, if only a subset of frames are selected, your changes are only going to be applied to those frames. The next mode is Linear. In this mode, max changes will be applied to the frame you're currently in. And I need to point out that to move to the desired frame without resetting the frame selection, you simply need to move the slider. Alternatively, you can move to the desired frame using the hotkeys. The Bezier mode works similarly, but the change curve will be smoother. Please note that the positions are preserved at the first and the last frame of the range. This option controls the rotation mode. When Fixed Pivot mode is selected, you can rotate the entire motion trajectory, and in this case, the frame you're currently in will be the pivot. When using Moving Pivot mode, the object will rotate every frame and the trajectory will remain essentially unchanged. When in Bezier mode, the greatest rotation will be in the frame where you're currently in, and the strength of the rotation will gradually fade towards the first and the last frames. Let's take a look at a more complex example. Here, I have an animation of a character who runs from one place to another. I select the animation frames and turn on the Interval Edit mode in Step mode. I also enable the display of ghosts and the trajectory of the character's center of mass. In Step mode, I'm moving the entire animation. I can also rotate the animation. However, if let's say I wanted to rotate the character's head, I'll run into a small problem. When I rotate it in global mode, it will shift the head position in adjacent frames, and in this case, it will break the entire animation. Therefore, for tasks like this, it is necessary to enable Moving Pivot mode. And now the head is rotated in all the selected frames. If we are in the Bezier mode, the head will be rotated a lot in here, and then it will gradually rotate and return to the original position. You can combine the Interval Edit mode with copying, for example. Let's say I copy the object's position in here, then I select a range of frames and paste the copied position using Step mode. This way, my entire animation has been transferred so that this frame corresponds to the new position. For example, I can also copy an object's position from the middle of the animation and make that position the beginning or the end of the animation. In the Bezier mode, I'll get a smooth trajectory as I move to the new position. I recommend using this when you want to loop an animation. What I mean by this is that you can copy a pose from the beginning of the animation and then paste it to the end of the animation so that the character gradually reaches the exact same pose. I will cover this in more detail in a separate video on creating animation cycles. You can use the interval edit mode with other tools. In the previous video, we looked at an example with auto pose points. This also requires interval edit mode. First, I need to lock all the auto pose points to the selected frames and then deactivate the ones I need. This will correct the position of the points and character's pose. And of course, the most important instrument, Unbaking. It deletes some of the keys and substitutes them with the appropriate interpolation type, with the goal to achieve an animation as close as possible to the original with the minimum number of keyframes. Select a range of frames and click the Unbaking button. Unbaking can be also used for individual tracks. You can access Unbaking settings in this tab. The smaller the first number, the smaller the difference will be between the original animation and the unbaked one. But you'll also get quite a few keyframes. To demonstrate this, I'll link the original scene before Unbaking was used. I will set the color to yellow, and thus, on the yellow character, we'll see the scene before applying Unbaking. Alternatively, if the number here is large, then some of the movements, especially small ones, will be lost. But you will also get fewer keyframes. The second setting is responsible for fixing the auto-posing points. The smaller the number, the fewer differences there will be in the poses. At low values, more points will be activated in order to accurately preserve their original position. And at high values, the position of many points will be selected automatically using AI. In this case, this led to small discrepancies with the original pose. However, this can be used for quick correction of the original poses. There is also a separate setting for the fingers. Unbaking can also be broken down into different stages and applied separately. You are unlikely to need this when cleaning up mockups, but I'll briefly explain what this mode is. To demonstrate, I will get back to my test scene. Let's also enable the display of the fulcrum points. It can be done using this button. The fulcrum points are highlighted in green. Now let's select the frames and open the Mode Selection dropdown. Let's select the first one. Here, keyframes are only placed on the frames where the fulcrum points change. The rest of the interpolation will be fixed. Let's break this down. Here is the first keyframe, and the second keyframe is created in the frame where the second leg is lifted the highest off the ground. Then, in the third frame, the legs are back on the ground. Then we have the next frame, and this is the last frame before the jump. After this one, the legs lift off the ground. In this frame, the legs are highest off the ground. And in this frame, the legs are back on the ground again. And there are no more keyframes since the fulcrum points do not change until the end of the animation again. The animation is preserved due to the fact that the interpolation is fixed. Now let's try the next mode. Adjust keys and interpolation. Here, more keyframes are already placed, and different types of interpolation are set for different tracks. But the tool still hasn't affected the auto-pausing points. And in the third mode, it will also activate or deactivate the corresponding auto-pausing points. In my case, the elbow points were activated. This way, after applying all three modes sequentially, we get a result similar to simply unbaking the animation. So these are the main tools that are most convenient to use when cleaning animations. I can use them for various tasks in my Mocap.